Salim, on May 11th, Donald Trump, in true Trumpian fashion, tweeted out Obamagate in all capital letters, more or less in a response, I think, to the fact that General Flynn is no longer going to be tried for ostensibly lying to the FBI, and that is if the federal court judge doesn't bring it back into court, and also saying that he got caught, Obamagate. And Obama himself, to the Flynn situation, has said that the rule of law is at risk. So lately, in the whole Spygate scandal that is plaguing the United States, we're seeing this new development, Spygate going now to Obamagate with General Flynn. And it's just one more example, I think, of how deep this swamp is, especially since Obama has broken usual historic protocol of stepping back as a former president and allowing the new administration to go and do what it does. That breaks the decorum, the style, the grace that former presidents used to have. They would go back into obscurity, write their memoirs, open up their libraries, and sip lemonade on the porch. Not with Obama. He still thinks he's president. So I want to ask your opinion on the Michael Flynn case, the Obamagate thing, and perhaps conclude our discussion today by talking about the fact that we've predicted all of this. Not the details, but the depth of the swamp and how we get out of it. But before we get into that, Salim, I'd just like to remind our viewers and our listeners to go to our webpage at justratemedia.org, have a look at all of the features that we have there, over 600 radio programs that we produce on shortwave. We have other podcasts like VSI Radio International, the Daniel Metz Show, Left, Right, and Center, that we've archived on our site. You can go there. Also, you can click on a button to give us your email address so that which you can keep you updated. And of course, there's always that PayPal button there for those so inclined. So with that out of the way, Salim, Obamagate, your views?
This is a huge thing. And again, time will not give us to get into it. Books are now being written about it, and more will be written. And then with time, as historians look back upon this matter, with all the documents released, or most of the documents released, classified documents released, we, that is the people, we the people, particularly the American people, will get to see how deep, how wide, how corrupt what we now know is the deep state. One of the things that has happened with the election of President Trump in 2016 and his challenge to drain the swamp, that if President Trump has achieved nothing, if we say that his presidency did not make any progress on any issue, we can say with some certainty that his presidency has revealed how much the American Republic is basically already lost. And the question is whether the American people will get it back. Because what the deep state is, that is the administrative state, that is the permanent bureaucracy, that is what in a recent book by Michael Lind has called the new class, that is the people in Washington, D.C., that basically forms the government. They run the country. The election is simply a facade. In America, in that sense, has become a Potemkin state. People go as a ritual and as a routine every 2 years and every 4 years for the general election, that is the election of the president. They go through the ritual, they cast their vote, and one of the two party nominee is elected as the president, but nothing fundamental changes because in effect, the deep state is a uni-party. The Republicans and the Democrats are in full partnership in what is called the uni-parties. So that is huge. And we can get into that discussion shortly. But you point out that the president tweeted on Mother's Day that everyone is caught in a sense, and this is Obamagate. Obviously, he's not only referring to, by calling it Obamagate, what is happening right now. And while the media is focused on coronavirus, and that too has an element of the deep state involved in it, in fact, a very large element of the deep state involved in it. The story of what has been going on for now 4 years remains obscured and unreported in the mainstream corporate media in America. The mainstream corporate media in America, New York Times, Washington Post, all the television, the corporate television, ABC, NBC, etc., including ours in Canada, is no longer a place for investigative reporting and holding the people who are in power, their feet to the fire. That means representing the people, being truly what it is supposed to be, the fourth estate. The media has become the arm of the deep state. And as an arm of the deep state, it is basically producing narratives, spinning narratives. It is not exploring and examining and analyzing the story. It is, as I say, spinning the narrative on and for and on behalf of the deep state. And the deep state functionaries are uniparty, but predominantly Democrats. And so that's where most people do not know the details and are unaware of it. It's just the alternate media that is where you and I are. And in America, the alternate media is somewhat broader. It is the conservative media, part of Fox News and the various online journals, and to some extent the Wall Street Journal has been reporting what we now know and why President Trump called this as the Obamagate. That is, right from the beginning, from the moment Trump was nominated by the Republican Party for being the Republican nominee in the 2016 election, in effect, Trump won that primary. And so the Republican Party had to give him the nomination in July of 2016. So right from that moment in July of 2016, even if not previous to that, the Obama Whitehouse, with the entire massive resource of the intelligence agency, 17 intelligences, the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, the DIA, etc., etc. So with the entire power of the intelligence agency and their capacity and capability to surveil every single individual in America, they focused that on the Trump campaign to basically disrupt the campaign. And they spun this narrative that Trump is in collusion with Putin's Russia. And it's
Salim,
Putin's Russia that has given Trump the advantage to win the election. Now that has all been exposed as hoax, and we can talk about that.
that's the interesting thing for me, is that throughout history, government has always been corrupt. Leaders given power are always corrupt, with rare exception. And it is only the media that they are the vanguard. They are the firewall between the people at large and the institutions, and they have failed. That wall is now collapsed. And what I find interesting is that somebody recently said that none of this would have happened. The whole Russia collusion story, the whole surveilling of Carter Page, the egregious acts of people in the swamp in the United States would never really have happened, because if we had, or the Americans had, a responsible press, they would know that they can't get away with this kind of stuff. And the fact that they have, and the fact that if you turn on CNN or MSNBC or the like, and And just as soon as they open their mouths, you can detect, as a rational person living now with our alternative media, an instant access to the original stories, the original speeches of Trump, and the original documents as they are seen by the courts and things like that. Everything they say is a lie. And I'm not really exaggerating there when I say everything they say is a lie. They might just tell you, for example, that Trump gave a speech today. But after all of that, everything else after that is a lie. They spin it, they distort, they omit, they deceive. And what I really have difficulty understanding, Salim, is why. For a paid politician, I can understand. He's trying to curry favor. He's trying to get influence. He's trying to maintain his job. But for a journalist, why? What's in it for them? Because, CNN is losing money. They're extremely low in the ratings because of all their deceit. And I see no turnaround. What is it in their mind that's making them do this? Is it just simply a political agenda? Is it that shallow?
Well, the question at once it may be confusing, and we have been trained. I
Sorry.
mean, that's what you are talking about, trained to believe, or through your education to believe, that the media is supposed to be there for investigative reporting and reporting facts, not opinion. As they say, you have the right to your opinion, but you don't have the right to your facts. The facts have to be objective and established, evidence is provided, and then it is left to the media. Has a comment section, the opinion columns, and they can, use those facts. The writers base their opinion on the facts, and there can be a diversity of opinion, left, right, etc. And that is okay. But the facts that such and such thing happened, and this is the evidence, and that can be objectively ascertained, needs to be reported. And what has happened, what we can see over the last half a century, you might say, going back to Vietnam War, and therefore Watergate, which happened during the Vietnam War, the election of President Nixon in 1968, and then the re-election campaign of President Nixon during 1972, when precisely in the period just before the election of 72, the Watergate event took place. And we have to refresh the memory of people so they understand what is being called Obamagate, because this is worse than Obamagate. Watergate was simply, in comparison, a minor robbery, you might say, a minor burglary. It was, in fact, a case of burglary. And Obamagate is the entire structure of what we are now seeing, the deep state being used by a sitting president against the political opposition, which is America in some ways has become like the Soviet Union or like China. That is, if you control the instruments of the police for political reason, then there is no independence. There's no checks and balance. And where the media is, after all, I mean, in technically an open and free society, which is the United States, and we still believe it is an open and free society. How long it will remain so is the question that all of this is posing for us. The media is a private operation, private in the sense, it is owned by corporations or by individuals who have the money, who set it up, and who run it, and therefore there is an ownership of the media, and the journalists, people involved in the media, are therefore following a profession, professional journalists. But the ownership, you're working for a company, a corporation. The Times New York Times is a corporation, Washington Post is a corporation, NBC, ABC, CBS, all of these are, privately held corporation. And so the belief is, the premise is that the media will be the fourth estate, as you say, the firewall for the people, between the people and the people in power, and therefore be bringing facts to the people and holding for the people in power, accountable. Well, what has happened is the ownership of the media has now become part of the deep state. It is no longer, in a sense, at arm's length with the deep state. It is what we might call crony capitalism. It is now completely in embrace of the deep state. These are now these massive corporations. These are interlocking shareholders and investment. And you can see by the personalities that move, say, for in the CNN or ABC, NBC, the people who are the pundits, the talking heads, they are in a rotation between their position as pundits on the CNN, for instance, and then serving in the government. So you see all the top talking heads in the CNN on this issue of Trump-Russia collusion, which was a narrative that the Democratic Party spun in 2016, soon after Trump became the Republican nominee officially, and carried it on till right now, where we are speaking, almost 4 years later. So you have John Brennan, who was the director of the CIA during the Obama period, the 4 years in the last second term of Obama, the CIA. Before that, he was the head of the counterintelligence within the CIA. He was the chief of counterintelligence, then became the director of CIA appointed by Obama, who is sitting in the CNN as the man with the expertise to talk about Trump-Russia collusion. The same thing with James Clapper, who was the director of the Office of National Intelligence, the main intelligence agency. In fact, as it says, the Office of National Intelligence, that is the director who basically brought together all the others 16 intelligence agencies in one place, and was responsible for the 16 intelligence agencies. Well, James Clapper sits on the CNN talking about the Trump-Russia collusion, and a whole host of other people, people who had been in the Department of Justice, people who had been director or the deputy director of FBI, Andrew McCabe, who was fired from FBI after it was revealed by the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, that he had basically lied, but no indictment has been brought against him. And that's another question, why? And so you have this entire fusion that has taken place between the corporate mainstream media, the ownership of the mainstream media, and the deep state. Take Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, the founder and the chief executive, CEO of Amazon. Jeff Bezos bought Washington Post. And I can say the only reason he bought Washington Post, which was simply loose change for him, but it was a multi-billion-dollar purchase. He bought it not only for his own ego, but to use it as a battering ram against a fellow billionaire, that is Donald Trump, when Donald Trump was running for the presidency and is the president, And so there you see, Bezos is using the Washington Post to basically undermine and go after Trump with what Trump has called fake news, lies, falsehood. Same thing goes with the New York Times. New York Times is owned by, New York Times was going into failure, and it had put it up for sale, and it was rescued by this guy, the Mexican billionaire, and one can imagine where he must have made his money. Mexico is notorious for its drug trafficking. His name is Carlos Slimmy. Now, Carlos Slimmy is the guy who invested in New York Times. And so New York Times is, in that sense, an instrument of Carlos Slim to hammer Trump,
So
or
this is
be in cahoots with the deep state. So that's the answer to your question.
yeah. It seems
The
that it's a
media
clash
is
of
not
titans.
separate
Yeah,
from the deep state.
it seems that then what you're describing is a clash of titans. The ruling class, as some have called it, the elite, and I think that if people want to get a good idea of how broad and deep the swamp really is, they should take a look at the Epoch Times infographics on some of these issues, especially the Spygate infographic they brought out about a year and a half ago, I think it is now. I'll put a link in the description of this video for it, but you can see all the way from the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, and Hillary Clinton, to the White House and the Department of Justice and the CIA and the FBI. And in that infographic, they, of course, don't neglect to put in the bottom left-hand corner, all of the media from the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and MSNBC and all of those. They put them there as pawns, as manipulators, as being instrumental to the entire Spygate scandal and being complicit in it. So the swamp is broad, the swamp is deep, but I think it's rather fortuitous, I don't know, serendipitous, whatever word you want to use to describe the fact that we are very lucky right now to be living in a time when we have alternative media who don't have, who aren't part of the swamp. And for example, I refer back to some writings that you did many years ago, in fact, in PJ Media, in the American Thinker, where you were talking about how big the swamp is, not necessarily using that word, but how big of a problem the United States has with its corruption, political corruption. And bringing this to light before the Trump election, I think, only shows that the power of the alternative media, shows like ours, and shows like even Glenn Beck, and shows like that. Because Trump won, despite the breadth of the swamp, despite the fact that 99% of the media were against him, despite the fact that the educational institutions, the universities, colleges, all of that, the DOJ, the FBI were investigating, surveilling him, the CIA, all of that, all of this huge machinery was against him. But because people could simply go onto YouTube or Twitter or any of the blogs out there and find out for themselves exactly what Donald Trump was saying, unfiltered, or exactly the extent of the lies the media spew every night. Because of that, I think the United States has been given a pause, or at least a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, some of this can be cleaned up. What do you think?
Yes, I mean, the 2016 election, in so many ways, stands out as a unique and unprecedented election, and it will remain so, whether Trump is able to come back in 2020 and carry on what he promised, or what was his banner, drain the swamp, the deep state. Whether he can accomplish that remains a big question mark. I mean, 4 years have gone by of his first term, in which the deep state not only encircled him completely, and tied him down. He could manage, he was able to manage to deliver part of his agenda in terms of his economic policies, his trade policies, to some extent his immigration policy, the issue of this endless wars, and to bring that to an end in the Middle East and elsewhere, and try to reorient American foreign policy and American domestic policy back to what was his slogan and what is the campaign theme of 2016, and to some extent it is still the campaign theme in this election, will be make America great again or keep America great, you know. So in that sense, 2016 election will stand out. But what you are raising the issue about the deep state, about as a result of the word that Trump has used, Obamagate, is alerting people who want to be alerted. You know, you can ring the alarm bell, you can have the red lights flashing, you can have the alternative media that we have created, and that too is now open to question, because this alternative media does not, in a sense, belong to you and me. It is a platform, and the people who own it, the tech giants, Google, Facebook, Yahoo, YouTube, they can shut us down, or they can shadow ban us, or they can change the algorithm and, you know, destroy what we are trying to do, you know, and say. So we are still, in that sense, you know, not in any way in control of the news, of the message, of the narrative that is in effect controlled by the deep state. And so what Trump campaign and Trump presidency has revealed is the immense chasm, the divide between the people, we the people. The republic is supposed to be we the people. The Constitution is about we the people. We are the sovereign. I'm talking about the American people. Elect their representative, you know, and then unelect them and select somebody else to replace them with, in the cycle of election that goes on every 2 years for the Congress, every 6 years for the Senate, and every 4 years for the president. This constant process by which the republic is supposed to cleanse itself. But what happens if that election process of cleansing itself becomes a charade? And that's what it happened. Remember, in 1960, when President Eisenhower, who had served his 2 terms, who was the supreme commander of the Allied forces in the greatest war that America fought, 1941-45 in Europe, in his farewell speech in 1960, President Eisenhower warned the American people to beware of the military-industrial complex, that the military-industrial complex is taking on in magnitude and in importance and accumulating power in their own hand, that is the hands of the complex, which is based in Washington, that is no more, will be accountable to the people if the people are not aware of it and check it. That was 1960. We are in 2020, 60 years later. The military-industrial complex has become the deep state. It has basically swallowed just about everything, in the sense that it is what is the American Republic, but run by people from behind the curtain. And the politicians are then the puppets of the deep state. You elect a Republican, you elect a Democrat, it doesn't matter who you elect. They belong to the deep state. They legislate what the deep state wants them to legislate. For instance, you know, in 2009, when Obama's term began, the signature issue of Obama's presidency was to be Obamacare, that is one payer system in healthcare, taking away into the hands of the state almost 1/6 of the economy of America. So the Obamacare was legislated through, as any legislation has to go through. It was brought into the Congress, went through the committee hearing, was passed in the Congress and the House, then went into the Senate, passed over the Senate, came back, voted upon, and Obama signed it. When Nancy Pelosi was asked at the time when this process was going on, reaching its culmination, by the White House reporter, sorry, by the reporters in the Congress, the media, speaking to the speaker. She was a speaker in 2009. What is in the Obamacare? And she famously replied, well, let the Obamacare be passed and then you all will know about it. That means you underling, you serf, you American people, you don't need to know about it. It will be passed and then only you will come to know about it. Jonathan Gruber, who was one of handpicked experts, so to speak, in the designing of Obamacare, he was an economist at MIT in Boston. And so the committee that was created to provide the specialized input in writing up Obamacare, Jonathan Gruber was in it. And he, in one of a rare moment that was caught in the camera, said, we can trust upon the ignorance and stupidity of the American people to get this bill through, this massive bill that was being passed. All of this was revealed not in a sense by the mainstream media or by the politician. It was revealed by the alternative media people like Rush Limbaugh on his daily radio broadcasts and show. And they put the fire on the feet of the politicians, in this case, the Republican politician in the Congress, and not a single House Republican voted for Obamacare. So the Obamacare was passed without a single Republican vote in the House. It was a complete Democrat bill, and that's what that the American people are still, in some sense, dealing with, because when Trump got elected, one of the promise was that he will get Obamacare scrapped. Well, when the repeal and revoke of Obamacare went into the Senate, it needed a unanimous vote. That was the rule. And at least from the Republican side. And John McCain, who had his own personal grudge against Trump, apart from being a member of the deep state, stood up and thumbed it down.
Yes, I remember.
And McCain was a Republican senator.
And McCain
You
also
had a Republican president.
Yeah, McCain. Just to show you what you said earlier is that this Swamp Thing crosses the aisle. McCain was also the person who gave up the Steele dossier to the FBI, if I'm not mistaken. It's a very complex issue, but I understand that he was presented with it, and he gave it to the FBI.
You are absolutely right. I mean, so let's get back to the Obamagate, the Trump-Russia collusion, because that was the whole narrative that was played out over the last 4 years. It all began during the Republican primary. And there were 17 candidates running, senators and congressmen, some businessmen, governors, and independents like Ben Carson for the Republican nomination in 2016 election. And Trump won. But the Republican Party did everything to stop Trump from winning. And Trump won because of the people. People were waking up slowly that the situation is hopeless. And as I said, you're referring to me, my writing. I said that all the way back in 2011 in a piece that I wrote. I had been at that time a nationally syndicated columnist for the Sun Media, and I was writing my weekly columns. And throughout the period, the election of 2008 and after, I had been one of the few people in the media here in Canada that was writing about Obama. And I had basically in 2008 called out Obama as the fraud and compared him to the famous musical, the character of the famous musical in American theater, the Music Man, and the fraud who ran the Music Man, Harold Hill. And I compared Obama to Harold Hill, sweet-talking con man. And of course, I am a nobody, in that sense, it was my column. But in 2011, I pointed out in a special piece I wrote for PJ Media in America, and in which I said that the Americans are lost. It is hopeless. And the only way America will be saved, the Republic will be saved, when the sons and daughters of the truckers in America, that was the word I used, the truckers in America, the people who keep America running, who protect America, who feed America, etc. And I use the term trucker as the metaphor of the working people of America.
You could have said
not
plumber just as equally.
Not the snobs, not the elite. That they will save America if America is to be saved. Well, 2012 election, it failed. Mitt Romney was another con man, and he's a Republican, and he is a member of the deep state, and he basically faded out after winning the Republican nomination, and the children of the truckers knew that. They didn't come out to vote for Mitt Romney. So in 2016, they came out. The children of the truckers that I called out in 2011 were what Hillary called out, the deplorables, the basket of deplorables, the xenophobic, Islamophobic, homophobic, misogynistic, all of this were the people who she described as the people in red states, that is the flyover country. But it is they who voted for Trump, not the Republican establishment and the people. So the Republican establishment, during that primary, they cooked up stories about Trump. And McCain was responsible to get the salacious story that had been passing around brought together, which was brought together by this man, Christopher Steele, an MI6 intelligence person, the British intelligence person, MI6, who hated Trump for his own reasons, and passed it on to McCain. And McCain, there's a Canadian angle to it. McCain came to Canada in the spring of 2016 at what was called the Halifax Security Conference. Annually, it is held in Halifax at the university over there, Dalhousie. And there, McCain passed on this folder of salacious stories to one of his person that he was in contact with, to take that back to England and then to release it from there. However, the Republican Party got aware of it and wanted to drop the whole thing once Donald Trump had basically won the nomination before the convention. And so it was dropped. Then what happened? That same story and the same folder was picked up by the DNC and Hillary campaign. They picked it up, they financed it, they got their people, Fusion GPS, a setup in Washington, D.C., that does what is called the opposition research. Elections are big money game, and that's why hundreds and millions of dollars are spent in election campaign. And it is basically professionals who run it, So there it is. It's not about we the people. And Fusion GPS, that took this story and added to it, brought in Christopher Steele, and this became the Steele dossier, all paid by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee, that then was passed on to the FBI. And as we go deeper and deeper into the story, and we don't have the time, the point is that the FBI, in their own investigation of these stories, came to the conclusion that much of it is fake, but nevertheless used this story as a framework to launch the investigation into the Trump campaign, to surveil Trump campaign, spy upon Trump campaign, and the members of his campaign, George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, who were all under surveillance as a result of the Steele dossier. They wanted to follow these people, spy upon them, and find a way to hook them into, lead them right into Trump, and then be able to smear Trump with these salacious stories that had been spun around and collected by Christopher Steele through his contacts in Moscow. Okay, the long and the short of it is, the Steele dossier and other mechanisms were used by the FBI and other intelligence agency, the CIA, that is James Comey of the FBI, John Brennan of the CIA, to launch a counterintelligence operation against Trump and his campaign, put his Trump Tower under surveillance, and snoop into every aspect of the campaign. In effect, and this is the contrast, the Watergate was a third-rate burglary operation run by a few of Nixon's team players in the campaign to re-elect him as president. And these were just underling way down the ladder of the campaign team, who on their own initiative, the name now escaped me, who burgled the Democratic National Committee in the Watergate complex. Watergate complex is in Washington, D.C., a townhouse condominium complex, apartment building. And the DNC office was there, and they burgled it to get some information out of DNC about what they were planning to do the campaign. Anyhow, they were caught. They were arrested. They were thrown into prison. And as the investigation, the police investigation began on this matter, and FBI, the matter started reaching into the Nixon campaign, eventually into the White House. And when the word went up to Nixon, the issue, Nixon basically engaged or gave authorization to his chief of staff, Haldeman, and others around him to obstruct the investigation. And so it became, the matter turned into, from burglary into obstruction.
You're right, Salim.
Question: when did you know it? And how did you know
this
it?
whole Watergate thing is, like you say, peanuts compared to the fact that what Obama has been accused of doing, or at least the Obama Whitehouse and the Democratic National Committee, reversing the roles here, is using the infrastructure of the state to do these things, not some private individuals in the White House or associated with Nixon, but the CIA, the FBI, the DOJ. All of the instruments of the state were used to surveil a political opponent. This puts Watergate are miles away in comparison.
Exactly, Robert. Watergate was simply, as I said, a third-rate burglary that became the big issue about the president. When did he know it? When and what did he know? That's the obstruction of justice, and that's the matter that became the Watergate hearing, and the investigation into President Nixon's presidency, and ultimately, um, President Nixon used to keep a recording of all the conversation taking place in his Oval Office, and so there was a recording, and the Watergate Commission wanted those recordings, and President Nixon refused. The matter went all the way up to the courts, and the court decided that he has to release it, and it was released. But Nixon's people clipped 18 minutes out of the tape. Those 18 minutes are the most damning conversation that Nixon had with his close advisor in the Oval Office about what to do and how to do it in trying to prevent this scandal from undermining his presidency. Remember, whatever was the Watergate burglary, Nixon had won the 72 election in a massive manner. And the Democratic nominee, Senator McGovern, was swept out. I believe it was almost a 49-1 or a 50-0 electoral college victory. It was a massive victory for Nixon. And then Nixon went on to his China opening and so on and so forth. So on a foreign policy side, he was making, grand moves, during the height of the Cold War. He brought about the negotiated end to the Vietnam War, for which Henry Kissinger won the Nobel Prize with his North Vietnam counterpart. So this hearing that went on pinned the responsibility on the basis of obstruction of justice, and the Republican senators went to Nixon and told him that, sir, you have lost your support among the Republicans, and when the Republican senators went and told Nixon that, if the matter comes to the Senate for a trial, you will not have the vote of the Republican senators. That's when Nixon resigned, in 1974 and left. And you're absolutely right. Here it is. It is not a burglary. It is the entire intelligence structure and system, as you said, FBI, DOJ, IRS, DNI, CIA, military intelligence, and so NSA, the National Security Agency, that is responsible for the entire electronic surveillance, both inside America and outside America, the most sophisticated. That's the story about snooping and spying that Elizabeth Snowden, in a sense revealed, for which he had to run away, for which Obama was going to send out, arrest him and bring him to trial, and of course put him away. But he escaped. He escaped to Russia eventually, and Edward Snowden is in Moscow. Well, that was the first inkling of the power of this whole surveillance mechanism. And what Obama Whitehouse did, and Obama, nothing can happen without the president not knowing and without the president's approval. He might not put his signature on the dotted line, but he is, as Truman said, the buck stops here. Obama weaponized the American intelligence agency to be used against political opponents during a presidential campaign. And after the presidential campaign, that is after the inauguration, in this case of President Trump, to launch what had been already launched was to carry through a campaign by the deep state, that is the intelligence agencies, to get Trump either removed from the Oval Office by some mechanism, and which is where the role of the media comes in, 24/7 running with fake news. That is, Trump was in collusion with Russia, or ultimately to have him impeached. And they did impeach him, impeach him again on a completely fraudulent case. They couldn't impeach him on Trump Russia because after almost 3 years of investigation, 2 years of investigation by the special counsel appointed by the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, because the Attorney General that Trump had appointed, Jeff Sessions, recused himself within 2 weeks or 3 weeks of the inauguration of the presidency on the issue of Trump Russia, that he could not handle that file because he was himself in some ways involved with it, because he had spoken with the Russian ambassador, or had been seen with the Russian ambassador, Kislyak, which is the whole issue of Michael Flynn and his conversation with Kislyak. And so he recused himself. The question hung whether Sessions was blackmailed by the deep state, that there was something very terribly wrong about some aspect of Sessions' many years or many terms as senator from Alabama that was held against him, and that was being kept in as a way to blackmail him, and he was blackmailed, or whether he was a member of the deep state, and he had operated as a friend of Trump, and then gone on to become his attorney general. But when the time came to stand up and do what is needed, he recused himself and got out, and allowed a special counsel to be appointed, who then for almost 2 years ran a no-holds-barred investigation into what was a fake investigation, and here is the mechanism that they were using. It was a fake investigation on fake allegation. How do we know it is fake? Because now the documents are coming out. Those classified documents are being released, because all of this thing in some ways are over now. And Trump could have released it in the beginning, but then that would have been self-serving. He has to go through the proper channels of the executive branch, and you had people in the executive branch who were members of the deep state and who were delaying it. So for 2 years, there was Jeff Sessions, who was the attorney general, but who had recused himself. And the man who was running the DOJ, Department of Justice, was a member of the deep state, Rod Rosenstein, And so these documents are now coming out. And what these documents are revealing, one, is that during the congressional oversight hearing, while the Republicans were in control of the House in the period 2017-2018, and then after that, in the period that is after the 2018 election, 2019, and now into 2020, where the Democrats are in control, in the oversight hearing, the people came up, and those oversight hearings were done in camera, in confidence. They were not public hearing. These people, like James Clapper, like John Brennan, like Andrew McCabe, Sally Yates, and others, they, under oath, when asked whether they had material evidence on Trump about what there is being alleged, that he was in collusion with Putin, all of them, not one, all under oath, said they have none. They have no material evidence. That's what James Clapper said. And then they come out into public hearing And then they sit and then they talk to the media that there is Trump-Russia collusion. And we will get to know more about these details. And then there were selective leaks. And so the media were reporting and have been reporting what were the selective leaks and the narrative that was constructed, a fake narrative that was constructed. Now, the selective leak by the media, like James Comey did, that Andrew McCabe did, these selective leaks are felony. And therefore, these are now being investigated by special attorneys that have been appointed by Attorney General Bill Barr. The most notable is John Durham, who is US Attorney for Connecticut, who has been given the responsibility to go through all of these documents and then to pull together a grand jury and bring the indictments. And the indictments will possibly come on these individuals who were the heads of agencies, heads of intelligence agencies, who were members, senior members of the DOJ. So there will be an accountability, I expect. But how soon and when, that's another matter. The point is that these people talked one side of the mouth and used the media to push the fake news. And then in taking oath and speaking on camera to the House committees, they said just the opposite. So there's perjury there. There's complete, discrepancy. Now, why did this all happen, and what made them do this? Well, as you said, this is a big story, and we don't have the time. But I just want to pull it together for our audience. Why and how they did it, and we have arrived here, is because Obama and his people around him during the 2016 campaign were absolutely confident that Hillary Clinton will win. So that whatever was illegality, and then after the illegality, their argument, as Susan Rice, on the very minute that Trump was being sworn in, she goes into the White House to send an email from a White House server to herself, that is a server that she was using as a national security advisor for Obama, to herself, that Obama wanted all of these things to be done by the book, as if what was happening, the Russia-Trump collusion narrative, the spying, the surveilling, the false charges, the unmasking of people, which you and I haven't talked about, that is using the FISA code, the Foreign Intelligence Security Code, to reveal the identity of people like Carter Page and George Papadopoulos, while Michael Flynn himself was under target, by the NSA eavesdropping that was taking place. And that now we have seen the email log report that has been declassified and has come out. By the way, the mainstream media is not reporting it, so we have seen it. I have seen it through the alternate media where these have been put up. That Obama on January the 4th, that is just 2 weeks before the inauguration of President Trump, was having his closed door meeting in which Joe Biden was present, James Comey was present, Susan Rice was present, Sally Yates, the Deputy Attorney General, was present, and they were discussing all of this thing. And Obama instructs, do it by the book. So he knew about this. In fact, he launched it, and all of his underlings were involved in it on the assumption that Trump is not going to win. The deep state will be carrying on, and all of this thing will be washed away. They will be under the rug, just as what happened in the 2012 events around Benghazi. the deep state never brought any indictment on Hillary Clinton about her responsibility or what took place in Benghazi that led to the killing of 4 American servicemen, including the American ambassador to Libya, because the story behind that is a massive story of gun running that was taking place on the authorization by Hillary Clinton, where they were handing over weapons that had been collected by Americans from the terrorists, and then they were passing on to another group of terrorists, in this case, ISIS, operating out of North Africa. But all of that was swept aside and swept underneath the rug, because Obama won the 2012 election. So the working premise of all of this in 2016 and thereafter was that they are going to win. Trump's winning was the upsetting of the apple cart. And the deep state members would not let it go. They encircled Trump 360 degrees with the fake news and the full participation of the elected members who are members of the deep state. One sort of a wrap-up example, Senator Richard Burr of North Carolina, who just resigned last week from his position as the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is one of the more powerful Senate committees. The counterpart of that is the House Intelligence Committee that overlooks, as an oversight on behalf of us, the people, the executive branch, and therefore the Intelligence Committee. Senator Burr received, along with other members of the Intelligence Committee, in early February, a secret briefing by the Intelligence Committee on the breakout of the Wuhan flu, Wuhan virus. This was way back in early February. On January 31st, Trump had shut down or brought down travel restriction from China into America. And the same week, there was this special hearing. And lo and behold, on getting this special hearing about Wuhan flu, coronavirus, COVID-19, all the various names, Senator Burr and 4 other senators, Senator Dianne Feinstein, the Democratic ranking senator in the Intelligence Committee, and 3 other senators, they were all Republicans. They went into insider trading because they had the information, they knew what was going to happen. They went into insider trading and they unloaded their stock. Senator Burr unloaded something like $1.6 billion worth, $1.6 million worth of his personal stock before the crash would come. That news got leaked out. And here it is. The investigation began into Burr's activity. And Burr was therefore led to resign. And now Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, has appointed Senator Marco Rubio from Florida to become the acting chair of the Intelligence Committee. Well, Senator Rubio is as deep a member of the deep state as was Senator McCain, as is Senator Richard Burr. These are Republicans. Same thing in the House. So you see, it was an operation of the uniparty, the deep state, that has run this campaign. It's only Trump that could have withstood this. And the question that the people, the audience might want to know, how Trump has been able to stand up to this. Well, the main reason Trump has been able to stand up to this 360-degree attack on his presidency to derail him, to drive him out of the Oval Office, to impeach him, is because, first of all, he's clean. You know, I don't think there's any man in America or in the world that has not been run through investigation as Trump has been. And so he's clean. They couldn't pin him with anything. And number two is the Republican Party, not the establishment and elected members in the House and in the Senate. The Republican Party, that is the people who vote Republican, who manage the Republican Party in their own district, in their home states, they are now almost 100% Trump voters and Trump supporters. Without that Republican Party, these congressmen and these senators, at least on the Republican side, cannot get reelected or have a hope in hell to get elected if they want to run as a candidate. Therefore, the sitting members have to play a very neat balancing act where, as Lindsey Graham, the Senate chair on the Judiciary Committee, daily, every day, on Sean Hannity, on Rush Limbaugh, on Laura Ingraham, comes on the television and promises that his committee is going to have an investigation going on to find out who were these people, what did they do, why did they do it, etc., etc. Well, this has been going on now for 4 years. There has been no hearing. Nobody has been called into any accountability session because they know that they cannot do it, because if they do it, the whole uniparty thing will get unraveled because they themselves have got their hands in it. But on the other hand, they have to act publicly in a manner that they are doing the people's job, that they are representing the people. And so they're going to hold the hearing, they're up with Trump, they're going to vote with Trump, and so on and so forth. So this is the double game of this of the people of the swamp that is on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, it is a full-blooded press to politically assassinate and destroy him, you know. And that is what began before the election with the full approval and the full signature of Obama, and has carried on right now, until now. And so I would conclude by saying that unless the people truly themselves become activated to say enough is enough, we have to take the country back. 2016 election was only the first step in taking our country back. We're going to take the country back. We're going to drain the swamp. We're going to unelect all of these people that we can unelect. And we're going to elect people who represent us. And we're going to make sure that there's going to be term limit. Even if we cannot pass a bill that says there is a term limit for the congressmen and congresswomen and for the senators, as there is a term limit for the presidency, you know. I mean, Roosevelt was elected 4 times, and then after that, they passed the 22nd Amendment. The Congress passed the 22nd Amendment, term limiting the presidency to only 2 terms. Well, the people have to now decide that we're going to term limit them, because these people are professional politicians who simply are there basically greasing their own interests and the interests of those people, you know, the lobbyists, the corporations, the multinational corporations with whom they are in partnership. As Trump would say and has said, Washington, D.C. is where you have trillions of dollars at stake. With an American budget, with an American GDP at $22 trillion and an American budget, federal budget, close to $6 trillion, that is a lot of grease for a lot of people to grease themselves with. And that is what is at stake, you see. And unless the people take it back, well, we have a Republican name only. It is a deep state that runs it. And by the way, Canada is the same. So if you want to ask about where is our media, well, it was right in public. Mr. Trudeau, Justin Trudeau, put his fingers in the eyes of the people when he bought the media with $600 payment.
$600
And I
million.
bet, Robert, people have already forgotten that.
That's for another video, I think, Salim. So why don't we leave it there for today? Thank you very much.
Exactly. So there it is. Our own media is as sold out and as corrupt as is the American media.
Take care, Salim.
Thank you.